Hi there, hope you're well. In this video we're going to be making some basic plywood storage boxes to go in my basic build shelves here from a few weeks back. Yes, I know I've made basic plywood storage boxes before, but those were not a basic build. They had a fancy tool set, they had routers and a router bench and all that kind of stuff. In these basic builds, all we've got is a backyard MFT, an entry-level plunge saw, and a pin hammer. Yes, that's the new tool this week, £4.95s of Silverline's finest. One thing I have done with the plunge saw is to upgrade the blade from the stock 24 tooth to something a little bit finer. It's one of the best value upgrades you can make to an entry-level plunge saw like this, and I tend to favour the Triton 48 tooth blade at 12 to 14 pounds. It's one of the most cost-effective upgrades you can make and very, very simple to do. One thing I do when I switch between brands of blade, even if they say they're the same curve size, is to re-trim the splinter guard on the rail. You don't need to replace it, you can just peel it off and edge it out by a couple of millimeters, then re-trim it. That way you know that your cut line is bang on the splinter guard. And we do need that little bit of extra precision, a little bit of extra accuracy for these boxes. For the box fronts, I'm repurposing bits of the plywood loose tenon jigs. These are early test pieces. If you think birch ply is expensive by the sheet, try getting it precision machined into the right size and then laser cut badly. There's lots to choose from, unfortunately, and the two larger faces are a near perfect fit, and the three smaller ones are a pretty good height once I've trimmed back the horns on the top of the fronts, so I just need to get them to the right width. So when it comes to measuring for the sizing, you need to measure the opening, and it's always worthwhile measuring both the front and the back of the opening and take whichever is the smallest. Never take it for granted that those sides are absolutely parallel. We need to allow for gaps between the three boxes, and because there are three boxes, that gives us 4 gaps. I'm going to give about 2 millimeters per gap, which gives us 8 millimeters in total. So we take the width of the opening less 8 millimeters and divide that by 3, and that gives us the size, the width of the boxes, and for me that comes to about 140 millimeters. Now I have this convenient center line on the box fascias, so I can put a pencil mark 70 millimeters either side of that line, and that's where we know that we need to cut to. Now, because these are relatively small parts, I'm going to make a little crosscut jig. I've made bigger crosscut jigs before in the Tracksaw Workshop series of videos, and they're a great way to get square cuts easily, especially if you don't have an MFT top. But for smaller parts like these, where they fall between the dog holes, they're well worth knocking together from bits of scrap MDF and plywood. If you don't have any bits of scrap and plywood like this, then you can make something just as easily from bits of cardboard, old Amazon boxes or something similar. Just use whatever you have. I have a bit of well-used sacrificial 6mm MDF as a base, and I'm sticking that to the bench with double-sided tape, making sure that I'm butting one edge against my budget bench dogs. And then I'm using a straight cut piece of 12mm as the fence. The fence doesn't have to be 12mm, it could be thinner, but it does give that little bit of extra rail support if it's the same thickness as the workpieces, and I'll be supporting the other end of the rail as well with a couple of scraps. Again, I'm just holding the fence in place with double-sided tape and making sure it's tight up against the bench dogs before it's stuck down. I've put the first box face under the rail and lined up the pencil mark with a splinter guard. Then I'm clamping a stop to the bench with one of the other box fronts, keeping it in place under the rail against the fence and the stop. I can trim this edge back, then just flip it over and do the other side, and I'll repeat that with the other two pieces. I've also cut down a couple of spares just to use for tests. That'll come in handy next. So for these boxes, the front is rebated to take the sides and the base so they can be glued and pinned from the sides to keep the faces clear. To make the rebate around the 3 sides, we're just going to use the plunge saw. No routers available for this basic build. And while you could just make several passes with the plunge saw to create that rebate, it doesn't give the best of finishes. So I'll be making one cut on the inside face and one from the edge. I've set the saw to the 8mm or so depth of cut and made a test cut on one of the square faces. It seems pretty good, so I'll set a stop for the 6mm side material using an offcut against the splinter guard as a gauge. Then I can clamp the stop to the bench and make those cuts in each of the 5 box fronts, making sure that I'm cutting from the correct face. so that's the 6mm groove done for the sides. We need to move that stop out so we can do a 12mm one for the base, obviously without changing the depth of the cut, and then we can get on with stripping those out to make the rebate. So that's the cuts made on the inside face of the box fronts for the 6mm sides and the 12mm base. I need to strip that off now to make the rebate by making an edge cut along all three sides, and I'll do that by clamping this against the face of the bench and clamping the rail so that it just clips that depth and makes that perfect rebate. I might do a test first. Oh, that's going to work out all right. Quite happy with that. Nice and tight, nice and snug on the edge there. Plenty of room to get a pin through there with the glue sets. So we'll get the rest of those cut on the sides and then on the base with a change of depth. I'm doing all the 6mm side rebates first, just clamping the workpiece snug against the rail and making the cut, and then flipping the work over and cutting the other side. And then I can change the depth of cut to make the 12mm base rebates. And any slight burr I can take off with one of my cheap chisels, and then that's all the box faces complete. Alright, so I need to cut the bases. I'm scrambling around for little bits of 12mm scrappy birch. The bases need to be the depth that's available, less the thickness of the rebate on the front. So I'm just going to pop that in there and use a sliding square to take that measurement, and then I'm just going to back it off by about 1 millimetre or 2, just because if it goes too far in, it's easy to put a little packer in there to pack the front out, but if it sticks out proud, it's much harder to trim a couple of millimetres off the back end. So to make it nice and flush, just take a couple of mil off here. That gives me the measurement, and then I can get those bits and pieces cut, and then cut the bases. The bases need to be cut to the same size as the rebate, because the base is just going to fit in there, and then the sides are going to go all the way around. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Let me cut the base blanks first, and then the sides, and then the backs. So for the sides they need to be as deep as the base but as tall as the whole height of the drawer. So I'm hoping I can get them all out of this little scrappy bit of 6mm birch I found nestling behind some MDF. So as deep as the base. As tall. Tend to do. Going to be tight. I'm cutting strips off the 6mm ply for the 2 larger drawers and then for the 3 smaller ones, then trimming them back to size. So as I said before, the construction, this is very simple. The back is glued and pinned to the base. The sides are pinned through into the back of the base. And then that rebate is glued all around and joins the whole thing together. Oops. And it's pinned through the sides, so the fascia's kept clear. Very simple, very straightforward. You could probably just glue and clamp it, but I'm going to pin it because I don't have that many clamps and the little twiddly little bits. So we'll just get on with it and get these 5 up and gluing. All joints are glued with a fast grab PVA adhesive, and I've used regular panel pins to fix the base to the back. But I'm using thinner veneer pins to fix on the sides. For the fronts, there's a bead of glue in the rebate. Then pins through the sides and base. And yes, it has been a while since I used a hammer and nail, thanks for asking. So I was so slow on the hammering that by the time I'd finished the last box, the glue had set enough on the first one to start sanding. Everything gets a quick rub down with a P120 abrasive, taking care to knock off any sharp edges and corners and watching out for any splintering. And then it's a quick coat of finish on each of them. I like a beeswax finish on birch ply. It goes on easy with a stockinette cloth and it soaks in fast. It smells pretty great too. and an hour or so later they're ready for a quick buff up with a soft cloth. Let's hope they fit. Well, I'm happy enough with those. I think there are obviously many ways to make little boxes, of course. These go together very well, they work well, they look decent, and you can put them together with a very simple tool set too, although I have to admit there's nothing like nailing 5 little boxes together with a hammer to make you appreciate a cheap nailer and compressor. I'll call this one done for now though. Thanks so much for taking a look. Thank you as always to my amazing channel members whose continued support and fantastic feedback really helps to keep the public-facing videos what they are. And it's the conversations that we have that really help shape both the videos on the 10-Minute Workshop channel and the 10-Minute Workshop product too. But that's it for this one. Thanks so much for taking a look, and I'll see you in the next one.